Welcome to Adeptus On-Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to our latest edition of Adeptus On Air, and today we have another special guest in Josh Mathe. Josh, you are passionate about a lot of things, but fitness trainer, nutritionist, adventurer. I saw a lot of different descriptions. So just to start off, which way would you best describe yourself?
I think you're right. I do a lot of different things and I wear a bunch of different hats, but kind of the hat that fits the best, that encompasses everything, is life adventurer. And there's a piece
Love
of
it.
that that's very personal and selfish in a way that I like. I like to throw myself against things and see how it shakes out and see what I'm made of. But I use that in my work helping people because I help people in a variety of ways. As you said, I'm a nutritionist, I'm a run coach, I'm a personal trainer, I'm a mindset coach, and all of that kind of centers around and stems from wanting to help people find and step into the strongest, truest versions of who they are. And I love to do that. Like that's what I'm most passionate about is helping people level up, helping people find that light bulb and tap into the most passionate, most here version of who they are.
That's awesome. And how did you, if you could just take me back to the beginning a little bit, how did you even learn that about yourself? I'm sure you had to take your self journey before you were able to help others. But when did you discover, your passion for it, your gift to do those
That's
things?
a great question. And I don't think I've ever been asked that before. So I appreciate that. It has been, not surprisingly, a long journey with a bunch of left turns and backwards moves and falls and what some people might consider failures. But of course, that's what makes us who we are, and that's where we learn the most about who we are. So I was a baseball player as a kid, a good athlete, but overweight. And I did not realize that, we just are who we are until the world kind of tells us that we should be something else, unfortunately. So
Very true.
when I got to high school, people started making fun of me for being overweight, and um, so that's the first time I realized, maybe I should look at this. And I actually got motivated. So this was a good part of this. I got motivated to pay attention to my fitness and my nutrition so that I could be a better baseball player. So I really dialed that in and I got stronger and I leaned down and I became one of the faster guys on the team. And it definitely helped me on the baseball field. And I got really excited about, wow, if this worked for me, could this work for other people? And could I help other people do this? So that was when the light bulb kind of first went off for me. And then uh, I went to UC Davis and followed a girl to Sonoma State, and they didn't have nutrition as something that I could major in at Sonoma State. So I kind of did environmental studies, and then I did insurance for a little while. So it took me a while. It took me till probably 30 years old to fully embrace and accept this is who I am. This is what I'm passionate about. I want to do this full time. I kind of played with fitness and nutrition for most of my life. And then when I was about 30, I was like, even if I live under a bridge, I just have to do this. And it worked great as it usually does, right? When you just throw yourself at something and you are immersed in your passion, life usually works out. So that was a great learning experience for me and something that I use in my work with other people.
Wow, what a journey! And sounds like it's a 30-year discovery, and it's sometimes it's like that, sometimes it takes 30 years. Not everyone. I remember in my personal experience, I played football as a kid, and I was one of the better kids in my neighborhood. But then when I got to high school, I realized that every kid has a best kid in their neighborhood,
Yeah.
and I wasn't one of the best players on my high school team. So at that point, I decided, okay, I know I want to be involved in sports. I know football is not going to be it, and I had a talent for writing, so I got into journalism, and that kind of carried me on the sports journalism side, at least the first part of my career. So I got into business. So my discovery was probably about, I don't know, 14 or 15 years when I got to high school, but I was well ahead of the curve because once I got to college, I already knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so many people get to college and don't know yet.
Yeah.
and they're trying to find out what their major is and what their, and they might change and everything. But yeah, it's interesting that that journey can take a shorter time or a longer time.
And it
Um,
continues. So that was 15 years ago for me. But I still don't feel like I've arrived. Like I am constantly learning and constantly evolving, and the more I know, the more I understand how little I actually do know. And I've talked to other people my age and older that share similar sentiments. It's kind of like with maturity comes the realization that we really have no idea. We're just doing our best. But there's also freedom with that, right? We're all here as humans doing our best, trying to connect with other people, trying to have a family, trying to love one another and help one another. And there is no perfect, and we're never really going to arrive. We're just going to figure things out day by day. And I find that very freeing, actually.
No, it's a great point. I love that. That's a great point and great perspective and how to look at it. What are some of the common challenges, just to educate our audience, some of the common challenges that you see amongst the clients that you work with, some of the recurring themes that you have to kind of break through to get them to reach their potential?
So, our the way we eat in America, we meaning in general, are the standard American diet, or SAD, which is a funny and appropriate acronym, uh, is a lot of processed food, a ton of sugar and flour, things that flood our dopamine receptors in our brain and get us on this negative cycle where we keep wanting more and more, but it's less and less satisfying, which makes us keep wanting more and more. And it's really hard not to eat this way because we are bombarded with advertising. We are bombarded with opportunities. All you have to do is drive a mile from your house and you'll see Taco Bell and Burger King. And the human brain is wired to eat as much high calorie food as we can to store it for when, we're going to be crossing the plains over the winter. But our bodies aren't doing that now in 2024. So we're really programmed to eat and keep eating. And a, we have not adapted evolutionarily to this new normal where we have as much food as we want with a bunch of sugar, a bunch of flour, a bunch of calories, and it's really hurting us. So I would say, I work with a bunch of people who are just trying to lose weight. I'm also the director of performance nutrition at Colorado Mesa University, so I work with athletes, high level athletes, all day long. Uh, and no matter who you are, everybody shares a challenge. Everybody's on a different part of that ladder, of that spectrum. But we are all, including me, challenged by having as much food as we want, whenever we want it, and having to navigate that so that it's not hurting our health and longevity and performance.
Wow, wow, yeah, I could see that, just the amount of food and and comfort that we have, in society, and that wasn't really the way evolutionary we were supposed to be, to have this much comfort, and this much abundance of everything just available
Right.
to us.
And there are
I,
other themes and other things that people struggle with that are common, but I would say that's kind of foundationally the one thing that everybody struggles with.
is there a certain calorie count per day, or is that based on weight, or how does that part of it work? Like I weigh 170. Like how many calories should I intake a day, or is there no one size
So
fits
there
all?
is no one size fits all. We can best guess that based on your height and weight and age and activity level. And you can use a tracker like MyFitnessPal or Lose It and enter all that information and it will give you a good ballpark. There are other things that professionals have access to that can give you a little bit more detailed advice, but uh, it's pretty easy to get a rough estimate. And then, so maybe you get in MyFitnessPal and it tells you to eat 2,200 calories a day, and you do that, and you're slowly gaining weight. And your goal is not to do that. Maybe your goal is to lose weight. Well, that's good information. Then you can adjust. So whenever I work with athletes, and we don't always look at calories, sometimes that's appropriate, sometimes it's not. It really depends on your goals. and your mindset around food. Sometimes it kind of takes you down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go if you're too focused on the data and the numbers. But, whenever we work with somebody, it's always work. This is our best guess. And then we have to pay attention to all the metrics like, what is my weight doing? What is my energy level like? What is my strength like in the weight room and on the practice field? What is my mood like? What is my body composition? Way more important than weight. Weight is just a number. Body composition actually tells us, is that fat? Is it muscle? And how do all of these things mesh with my goals? And then we adjust as necessary. People like to hire somebody like me, a nutritionist, and want me to give them the magic and the answer, and then it's not that easy. It's kind of a treasure hunt, and it's an ongoing relationship, which is why I love it. It's really fun. But, the first step is to come see me. The second step is for me to give you whatever deliverables we talk about. The third and most important step is for you to do it, and for then us to continue
Exactly.
continue our conversation and adjust as necessary.
Exactly. No, perfectly said with that. And I have a lot of fitness questions to ask. Things that I just don't understand. I'm sure the audience doesn't understand. One is, how do you explain endurance to the average person, and how do you build it? How do you build that, and how do you explain it?
I love this question because people will see, that my wife does Ironman triathlons, or that I run 100 miles, or even a mile. Like, if you've never done these things, a mile can seem like 100 miles. You have no point of reference.
Yeah.
So people are like, that is amazing. I could never do that. And I hate it when people say they could never do that, because I'm just like anybody else. So is my wife. So is all the people who do this. Some people are genetically more gifted than others. But if you decided you wanted to run 100 miles, I could train you to run 100 miles. I didn't just come out of a womb able to run 100 miles. I trained my body. And that's how all of these people do that. So you might say, I have no desire to run 100 miles. That's fine. But you could run 100 miles if you wanted to. So I would say endurance is the ability to just keep going, and there's different kinds of endurance. The college athletes I work with, the 800 runners, so people who are running half a mile really, really fast, that's considered an endurance event. Like a mile, 2 miles, that's long
Yeah.
endurance for track athletes. But then obviously, if you're running a marathon, that's more endurance. If you're running an ultra marathon, which is more than 26.2 miles, that's more endurance. If you're running 100 miles, that's more endurance. But it's all about being able to go and keep going for a really long period of time. And something that most people don't realize is that means you're not going as fast generally. I mean, if you take a professional ultra runner, they're going pretty darn fast. But even for themselves, that pro ultra runner will run a 5K way faster than they'll run 100 miles. So that's the other thing people who have no point of reference think is, well, I could run a mile in 7 minutes. Is that guy running 100 miles averaging a 7-minute mile? And the answer is no. Like, in general, the
No.
longer you go, the slower you're going, which it's still hard to run 100 miles no matter how slow you're going, but you have to calibrate. You have to remember that whatever pace you're used to going when you're running, the people who are going for hours and hours and hours and hours are probably going a little bit slower. So that's hard in its own way. It's hard to run 100 miles, and it's hard to run a 5K as fast as you can. Those are just two different kinds of hard. And then how do you train?
That makes
How do you train people for this? You do it progressively, you do it strategically,
okay.
you do it thoughtfully and based on science. But
Mm.
in general, it's all about progression. You if you've never run before, maybe you run a mile this Sunday, and then maybe you run 2 miles next Sunday, and then maybe you run 3 miles the Sunday after that. And you have to build in rest. Rest is really, really important. And in general, you're going to want to build in different kinds of adaptations. So most run coaches will prescribe some kind of speed run, tempo run, where you're like pushing your lactate threshold, your ability to push faster for longer. and then some kind of just long, slow run. Those will usually be in most people's run plans throughout an average week. Now, some people do that differently, but the theory is we want to work on different parts of the body, different systems to make um, different adaptations to help you over the long term gain more endurance.
That's excellent. Excellent advice. Excellent advice. And Josh, when you're tired, when someone is tired, uh, is there a better way to breathe than others? I mean, I just huff and puff. It's probably not the most professional way to do it. Um, in and out my mouth. Is there a for an endurance athlete, for people trying to get better at endurance, is there a specific way to breathe that helps get air to the lungs better?
This is a funny question for me because I've done a lot of research on this, and personally, I just listen to my body and breathe the way my body wants to breathe. But there is a lot of science around this and people that have very strong opinions about this. In general, breathing through your nose is more, excuse me, is more effective and efficient. And it lowers your heart rate. So if you want to play with lowering your heart rate quickly, if you're doing sprints or something, even though you get done with that 100 meters and you just want to like, mouth breathe,
Yeah,
if you stop that and you kind of quiet your body and you make yourself breathe through your nose, your heart rate will actually drop quicker. Um,
interesting. Wow.
but there's all kinds of thought and theory about different rates of breathing and different kinds of breathing. But I would say that's the takeaway is nose breathe as much as you can. Basically throughout your life, nose breathing is better for you in general. So when you're sleeping, you should be nose breathing. When you're just sitting there working, you should be nose breathing. And when you are exercising, you should be nose breathing for as long as you can. Even when you are starting to push your body, play with nose breathing as much as you can, and it will regulate your heart rate better. And there's a great book
Interesting.
called Breathe by James Nestor. I might have it behind me here. I do not see it. Breathe by James Nestor, where he really deep dives this topic. So if you're interested in learning more about the kinds of breathing and why you would manipulate your breathing, excellent book.
Gotcha, gotcha. No, that's really good because I feel like I can't get the air in enough when I'm tired, through my nose. So I start mouth
Well,
breathing.
there will be mouth
Um,
breathing eventually, the faster you go. But I think there is power in playing with nose breathing even when it starts to get uncomfortable and trying to push that back.
Gotcha, gotcha. That's really good advice. I have a quick story for you, and then I'll ask the question. The question is regarding altitude, but I'll
Okay.
tell you my quick story first. Years ago, I was covering a Miami Dolphins versus Denver Broncos game at Mile High. They called it Mile High back then. And after the game, it was nighttime. It was cold. I think it was a snowy game in like November or December. And me and some media folks are walking back to the car. And because it was so cold and it was dark and everything, we decided, hey, let's speed it up, walk a little faster, to the from the stadium to the car. And we were dropping like flies. We like, whoa, what is going on? I mean, we weren't sprinting or running or anything, but we just decided to go beyond a normal pace and walk fast or light jog. And just all of us were just not, I mean, we were from South Florida. We weren't used to the thin air, and it just kind of hit us that, whoa, this altitude thing is real. So we understand how you know NFL players can
Yep.
struggle for 3 hours not training at altitude and all of a sudden playing there at Mile High. So it kind of hit us. So that was my quick personal story. That was years ago. My question for you is, how do you explain how altitude impacts the body, and those that live there, train there, are more adept to it, and those that just kind of get there for the first time and try to do some of the normal things they do, tend to struggle with it.
Great question. And I have a lot of experience with this personally and professionally. We recently moved, like a year and a half ago, we moved from Northern California at sea level to Grand Junction, Colorado at 5,000 feet. So
Whoa.
I've been training, I've been doing my run training at 5,000 feet for the last year and a half. And I
Wow.
was just telling somebody, like, I kept waiting for the feeling of, okay, my body's finally used to this, and it hasn't come yet. So it's been a
Wow.
year and a half, and I can still tell I'm running at altitude. Now I'm better at it, but it's not the same feeling as running at sea level yet. Maybe eventually my body will get used to it. So what's happening is our bodies are just getting not getting enough oxygen. We don't have the red blood cells to move the the oxygen. And eventually, when you live at altitude, you gain more and more red blood cells so that you're getting the oxygen that you need. But that can take a really long time. In general, the people who were born at altitude and grew up at altitude have better oxygen carrying capacity. Their hearts are stronger. They have more red blood cells. Their bodies are physiologically adapted to moving that oxygen better than people like me who lived at sea level for most of their lives. So that's why some people will use that as training. So to circle back, it I notice it's harder for me to run here than it is at sea level. But when I go run a race at sea level, I can run 2 miles a minute faster and destroy the people who are used to being at sea level. So you can use it strategically as a performance tool, which is why most run camps and fight camps, like people who are trying to get a performance benefit, UFC fighters, marathon runners, track athletes, cyclists, you name the sport. If there's endurance involved, the the major camps are at like Mammoth, California, or Flagstaff, Arizona, or Boulder, Colorado. There's this
Right.
ideal altitude window from like 5 to 7,000 feet where you're getting a performance benefit, but it's not too high that you're just kind of destroying your body. Like Leadville, Colorado, one of my favorite towns in the world, 3 hours from here, is the highest incorporated city in the United States at over 10,000 feet.
Wow.
And there's a really famous 100 miler there called the Leadville 100. And I've done it a couple times. The last time I thought, oh, I'm going to get this benefit, this bump. I'm going to stay there for 2 weeks before the race to just maximize my oxygen carrying capacity and kill the race. Well, this was before I understood physiologically exactly what was going on in the body. And we're learning more about this every day. This is a pretty new topic of research. But at 10,000 feet for 2 weeks, I was just kind of destroying my body. It was too high. I was getting dehydrated because that's something that happens at altitude. I needed more calories because that's something that happened at altitude. So by the time race day came around, I was just exhausted. So 10,000 feet is probably too high to hang out at. Unless you live there, eventually you will adapt. The best ultra runner on the planet, Courtney Dauwalter, she'll probably go down as the best ultra runner ever. She's incredible. She lives in Leadville. So her body has just gotten used to it. She's been there long enough that she's just a beast. But in general, if you're trying to get an altitude adaptation, you want to be in that 5 to 7,000 feet place. Um, and there's a lot of science around. Is it better to sleep there? Is it better to train there? Is it better to do both there? Is it better not to do it at all because of these negative effects we talked about? Like if I go do a camp at 7,000 feet, but I don't eat enough and I don't sleep enough because that's something else altitude does, and I don't drink enough, have I done myself a service or a disservice? And that is a
Point.
very good question, and it's really individualized. So if you're somebody who's interested in getting a performance benefit from altitude training, I would talk to a coach and be really clear what your goals are and where you've come from and where you're going and how close you are to your event, and do it really strategically. It is not as simple as, oh, I'm going to go hang out in Boulder for 2 weeks and get this huge benefit. It's definitely not that easy.
Wow. That's a lot of stuff to
Yeah.
learn. The Olympics is in Colorado, right? I'm not sure what city.
The Olympic
The
Training Center?
Olympics can't.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Olympic
Train.
Training
Yeah.
Center is in Colorado Springs. Yeah.
Yes. Colorado Springs. How high is that altitude, and do they feel it benefits them?
That
Obviously, to
is,
set up their whole Olympic.
yes, if you're there for a length of time, it will benefit you. What is the altitude there? I think it's like 7,000 feet. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So right in that sweet
Yeah.
spot. That you mentioned. Last question on altitude. When they say that the air is thin, what does that technically mean? Is that a literal thing? Is that a figurative thing?
Well,
What does that
kind
mean?
of both. What they were referring to is there's less oxygen in the air. So
Okay.
by thin, it
Okay.
means there's less oxygen.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. Tell us a little bit about what you have going at 110 Performance and your role also. You mentioned a little bit at Colorado Mesa, but just kind of tell me about those roles you have there.
Yeah, man, I love what I do. It's so cool. So my wife and I own 110 Performance Nutrition. It used to be Thrive Personal Training like 20 years ago. And then Kaiser launched their Thrive campaign. And
Oh, the insurance company.
no, Kaiser is a healthcare company in California. And
Yes.
they
Okay.
launched this huge Thrive campaign, and everybody thought we were Thrive. So everybody thought we were Kaiser. So we did an Ironman together wearing our Thrive kits. And everybody was like, "Yeah, go Kaiser." And afterwards we were like, "We need to change our name." So this was like 15 years ago or something. So we changed to 110 Performance. Where that comes from is no matter who you are, you can always push just a little harder. So it's, 110%, which obviously 110% doesn't actually exist, but it's about the mindset around finding your limits, testing your limits, seeing what you're capable of. So it's an endurance coaching business. My wife is the head coach. She's a triathlon coach primarily. She's the head triathlon coach for Colorado Mesa. That's why we're here. But we
Awesome.
we train runners, cyclists, um, triathletes for a variety of different distances. We coach them, and then I also do nutrition work with that business. So we've been doing that for like 15 years, mostly with just private amateur citizens. A 42-year-old surgeon who wants to do her first Ironman. We would train those people. Um, but I've also worked with many, both of us have worked with many high-level professional and semi-professional athletes over the years, helping them get to, world championship events. Um, and I worked with college teams as a nutritionist through the years as well. But just recently, so we moved up here in October because my wife got the job as the head coach for Colorado Mesa University Triathlon, which is so cool because it's an emerging sport. So it's a new NCAA sport. It's only been an NCAA sport for the last few years. And there's only 40 schools, 40 colleges in the nation that have a triathlon program. So my wife is one of 40 and she's helping shape this new emerging sport. And and Colorado Mesa happens to have a great team. They took a second at nationals last year. So it's been really fun to watch her thrive and to see her build something. And I just came on as the director of performance nutrition for the school last October, which is great. This is a position that doesn't usually exist in Division II sports. So this is Colorado Mesa's goal is to be the number one Division II sports program in the nation, and we're pretty close. Pretty much all our teams are amazing. Like our swimmers just won their sixth RMAC championship in a row. Our baseball team has the most wins at any level in the last decade. Uh, and and those are just two examples. We have great sports, the whole program, all the people, the athletic director, the coaches, the athletes, the training staff, everybody is about being their best and working together. So coming on and being part of that team has just been so amazingly fun. I get to work with all the teams. I get to work with the athletes individually, and it's all about, can I be my best? Can I be healthy? Can I be strong? Can I perform at my optimal level? And these are already great athletes, right? So I'm about, can I help you level up 1 or 2% so that you can be your absolute best? And when I see, the track team just set a bunch of records, when I see it on Instagram, like, oh, I work with that person, I work with that person, that's just nothing is cooler than that, man. And I love being on the energy of a college campus is like you can't beat it. So I'm just super loving it right now, and I'm gonna enjoy this ride as long as I can.
No, that's awesome, and I could feel the synergy, the synergy that all your teams have, and it sounds like you all, work together as a
Yeah.
group, and I see the joy in your face, how much you're loving it. Um, Tell me about your trip to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. How, how did that come about? How did you make it? Um, was there any was there any points where you had doubts? Just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Kilimanjaro. So I'm, as you mentioned, I'm an adventurer. I like to do kind of crazy things and different things and push my body and travel a lot and see different parts of the world. So this was about 5 years ago. It came about because one of my buddies is he's one of these yogis who has a couple studios, and people follow him all over the world. If he says, I'm doing a yoga retreat in Bangladesh, like 100 people will show up. So
Oh
he
wow.
was like, I have these yoga group and you have this adventure group. What if we were to combine our groups and do some more kind of epic adventure stuff? And I was like, great idea. What do you want to do? So he had the idea to do Kilimanjaro, and
Mm.
none of his people signed up, coincidentally. So it ended up just being people from my network. So
Yeah.
we went, I think there was like 6 or 7 of us, and there's a bunch of guided trips. Kilimanjaro, like many places in that part of the world, they require you to have a guide. You can't just go hike
Okay.
Kili. So we hired a reputable guiding service. We decided to take a long approach, both so that we could experience the area more and to acclimate. So we had like a 6 or 7 day approach to the base of Kilimanjaro. So we kind of wound around and built up our lung capacity and our hiking capacity. Everybody on that trip was in pretty good shape already, but it's kind of like, how do you get into shape to climb a 22,000-foot mountain? You don't really. So everybody
Yeah.
decided to take supplemental oxygen except for me. Um, and
What led to your decision not to,
uh,
if I may ask?
ego, and I have a lot of experience at high elevations, and I thought I would be okay. You know,
Gotcha.
I've been a backpacker almost my entire life. I was 7, my first backpacking trip. A lot of my ultra runs are at elevation. Uh, I do a lot of things at elevation. So I thought, even though I've never been to 22,000 feet, I'll be fine. And I might be wrong. I can't remember exactly how high Kili is. It's over 20,000, 21, something like that. So we take this approach, and I'm feeling really good. And then we get to base camp, which I think is still 4 or 5,000 feet from the summit. And, the whole thing's covered in snow. And they tell us, all right, eat a good dinner. We're going to wake you up at midnight because we want to get up that thing. It's going to take a long time. So we want to get up that thing in the middle of the night so that we can come down and still have time to get down. So they got us up at midnight. We start climbing up in the pitch black at like 2 a.m., I want to say, freezing cold. We just start marching up. You can't see anything except for the feet of the people in front of you. And I still felt good until so we're just trucking along. And once we got to like 500 feet from the top, I want to say, maybe 1,000 feet from the top, I hit an absolute wall. And in hindsight, it was probably altitude sickness, which I've had a couple times in my life. Altitude sickness is your body just not responding well to the altitude, and it can be life-threatening. Sometimes it's just like I'm a little nauseous. Sometimes it is your brain is swelling and you need to get down or you're going to die. Um,
Ooh,
and the hard part is, if your brain's not working very well, it's hard for you personally to identify that it's happening to you. So
yeah.
I started to feel kind of gross. My brain wasn't working very well. My body started to not work very well. And my guide, we each had a guide assigned to us, like a personal guide. And he was like, we need to get you down the mountain. And I was like, nope, I'm finishing this thing. Let me finish this thing.
Mm.
So he took my pack and he said, all right, I'm going to let you keep going. But if you get worse, I'm dragging you down the mountain. So
Mm.
2 of the other people couldn't make it to the top. So me and 2 other people crawl our way to the sign in the snow. We take a quick picture at the top, and then our guides just pull us down the mountain. And I barely even remember that. Like, I was stumbling down the mountain in the snow. I definitely started feeling better the lower I got, but even base camp is, like 17,000 feet or something. That's not low.
Yeah.
So I am lucky that I didn't have really bad altitude sickness where my brain was swelling. They would have had to like bring in a helicopter or something. So I stumble into the tent with my buddy who had uh what did he have? He had some kind of cold that was bad. I think he had, I don't remember, but he was sick and still tried to climb that thing, and he made it almost to the top. So we're like the walking wounded. We both sleep for like 4 hours after that, and then I felt a little more normal. But it was quite an experience, very humbling experience. And Africa itself is just such a cool, unique, different place. The people were so fantastic. We definitely could not have done it without our guides. Talk about amazing athletes. They don't have any supplemental oxygen. They're running up and down the hill. I mean, those guys are incredible. It was very humbling, which I like that feeling. That's one of the reasons I do these crazy things is to realize that, I'm just a dude and there's a lot of people better at these things than me. And I'm just one small speck. Like I like feeling that. So that Kili definitely made me feel that.
Yeah. Wow. What a test of your limits. Do you think the supplemental oxygen would have made a difference, or probably not?
Probably,
Your
probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's crazy. I read that your next plan, or something you want to do in the future, is to ride a bike across country. Is that true? How do you plan on that? How do you plan on doing that? What's your plan to execute that? 'Cause that sounds incredibly, incredibly hard.
I've always wanted to do, well, not always, since early college, I got this idea that I wanted to bike across the country because I think it would be a cool way to see the country. What's kind of funny is I don't particularly like biking, so that might make that challenging. But I'm used to these like really aerodynamic, uncomfortable triathlon bikes. You would bike across the country on a touring bike that would be much more comfortable. Um,
Mm,
and my goal is to do it in the next few years because I'm not getting any younger, and because, like all big goals, they don't happen unless you do them. uh,
yeah.
I was gonna go with my dad, and he decided a couple years ago, probably don't want to do that. He's 70 now. Uh, I was gonna go with a buddy. He just decided, I probably don't want to do that. So I'm probably gonna have to do it alone.
Oh man.
And I don't love the idea of being gone from my wife for that long. I mean, I could. We've been apart for long periods of time before, but it's probably a month or 6 weeks. And that's a long time to be alone without support. Um,
Yeah.
so I have not decided the exact route, although I want it to be beautiful. The easier route would be to go south across flat, warm country. I'll probably go over the Rockies because that's how I roll, because we live here now in Colorado. But I want to see some cool stuff, right? Like I either want to go through the Rockies or like go through Yellowstone or something. Uh, I'll probably take 6 weeks or so. I don't want to do it moseying in, 3 months, but I also don't want to try to race it. I want to see the country, but feel like I pushed myself. And right now, there's dreams and there's goals, and I kind of think of dreams as someday I'd like to do this, but I have no parameters around it. When you pull it down from the clouds and make it a goal, that's like, you make it smart. When am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Who's going to support me? It is not quite to that point yet. It's kind of in between a dream and a goal. Like it is going to happen, but I don't have it on the calendar yet. Once it gets on the calendar, I will figure out all those details.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I would assume spring and summer months make the most sense
Yeah.
for you. You couldn't
Yeah,
do something like that
I'll
in the winter.
probably do it in the summer, yes. And the other
Awesome.
thing
Awesome.
is, I have clients that I see every week, some that I've seen for 15 years, and we'll go away for 2 weeks here and there. But telling my clients, sorry, I'll see you in 6 weeks, I haven't done that my entire career. And it's possible.
Oh,
It's possible. They don't need me. They'll be fine without me for 6 weeks. But I do have some anxiety around just saying peace out to my clients for 6 weeks.
yeah. And would you be disconnected from the like? Would you have cell phone, or how would you? how would you manage communication or anything in that, especially if you're alone?
That has actually evolved recently. I think I probably would not have to be disconnected for very much of it, at least cell phone wise. GPS wise, I mean, I would have satellite access the whole time. So from a safety perspective, I have I have this little guy right here, which is
Oh,
it's a
thank you. Oh,
it's a
yeah.
GPS tracker that will tell people where I'm at all times, and I can send messages on it. Um, but
Nice.
you know, you bring up a good point. I could potentially, if I planned my days right, I could still train clients virtually while I'm on the road.
Tell us your social channels and where everyone can find your
Yeah,
work.
thank you. So you can find me on my website, which is joshmathe.com. I'm also most active on Instagram, which is at SmilingJ, and Facebook, which is just Josh Mathe. I used to have an author page, but I took that down. It's just a normal page now. And I really like to interact.
Yeah, I'm sure people have tons of questions, and we'll have notes in our in our show notes and everything. And Josh, thank you for the time, the education. I learned so much, and I'm way at the novice beginner stage of my fitness journey. So it's very helpful for me to understand, especially on the endurance side of how to really kind of push through and get that extra rep or push that extra distance, or as I'm working out. So that's super helpful, and I'm sure you helped the audience as well, Josh. Thank you so much for joining Adeptus On Air,
You're
Josh.
welcome, James. This was really fun. And anytime you want to have me on to talk about other stuff, I'm in.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.